Yeah, go ahead, Marco. Sorry.
Omar, so you said you graduated in May, right?
Yeah, I just graduated in May. Started work 2 weeks ago. I took the bar in July, so it's all kind of been kind of quick. What's your plan? What do you want to? What are you aiming for? What schools do you want to hit?
Well, I'll answer that question, but first I was going to tell you my sister took the July bar as well.
Oh
She
wow, no
graduated,
way.
yeah, she she graduated from American University.
Okay.
She has yet to receive her results back. So I'm guessing you must have gotten yours back, or you're still waiting on them.
No, I don't receive it till October 27th, so I still got, I mean, basically
Okay.
another month and a half left
What
before I
does
know.
it take?
Yeah.
So I honestly have no idea. It takes like 3 months. I don't
Is
really
it
understand it.
is it writing or is it like something that okay? All right.
Yeah,
All right.
half of the test is in writing, the other
Okay.
half you just circle bubbles. So yeah,
Gotcha.
I guess it's
Go ahead,
writing.
Mark. Yeah.
Yeah, and to answer your question, I want to stay in Virginia because it
Okay,
would help out a lot to save some money and just be near my parents.
okay.
I also don't want to go too far away from them. I'm kind of a mama's boy, so it would be difficult to, go to California. I'm actually applying to University of California, Berkeley.
Okay.
That's one of the schools. And then the Virginia ones are UVA, George Washington, Georgetown, some Ivy Leagues, but those are in God's hands, to get in. I'll need to. And then Boston College as well, and
Okay.
Boston University.
Nice. That's awesome, man. That's
Yeah,
really
so
cool.
I'm gonna need whatever LSAT tips you got because I'm really not liking those logical games right now.
Did you take it already, or is this going to be your first time?
It's gonna be my first time. I'm thinking of
Okay.
taking the November one, uh, but it depends how I feel in like mid-October
Okay.
because I want to get the best score possible. If not, I'll take the January one and then just have a later application.
Yeah, it's definitely a very rough test and takes a lot out of you. I studied for a year before I was like, all right, I feel ready enough to actually take it. I
Mm.
mean, I had the time, so I could take as long as I kind of wanted, but um, it's I only took it once. It's grueling. I didn't want to do it again. I was like, that's enough for me. Whatever I get into at this point.
Yeah, that's how my sister felt as well. She's like, one time, whatever I get, I get.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because
I don't mind to get into the details, but did you like what was the dates you studied from?
what was the what? Sorry.
The dates that you studied from? Did you do
So
like January to January or November to November?
yeah, I took the test. I think I took, was it the March test? I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically studied for the year. I was playing in Monterrey, and I asked. I guess after a game, I asked if I could. No, actually, I missed the game. I missed the weekend game, so I could take the LSAT because um, I mean, yeah, I remember there was a way to take it on Monday, but the only people who can take it on Monday is if you, or the only way you can take it on Monday is if you're Jewish. I'm not Jewish, so
Hmm.
yeah, I had to take it on Saturday. So
No, I had no idea about that rule. That's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So I tried my best. I tried to convince them, but no, it didn't work. So I had to miss a game.
You didn't
But
convert.
yeah, I tried my best too. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think you have to have some Jewish ancestry to become Jewish too. I did research it as well.
Yeah.
But no, it didn't work out.
What were you doing in Monterrey playing?
I was playing for Tigres. I was there for almost 4 years. So yeah, I guess this was 2018. So it was basically 6 months before I came back to the U.S. because I signed back for the team in El Paso in June of 2018, and I took that test March of 2018. Um,
Hmm.
then I kind of held it, didn't really apply to schools till COVID because I didn't really know when I wanted to retire, and I saw the opportunity during COVID where I could continue to play and study just because school was online and all law
Hmm.
schools were online. So I just applied during that year, thinking, oh well, I'll do my first year and then I'll figure out the other two. Maybe I'll push them back, defer, and continue playing. But I tore my ACL my first year of law school during my first semester, and that was the second ACL tear, and it just, I mean, it was like my seventh or eighth surgery, And I was just like, all right, well, the silver lining is I'm already in law school. I didn't want to retire, but it's just it all kind of happened and all developed. I mean, the silver lining was I was in law school and it made the decision a lot easier. But yeah, I mean, I was still relatively young. But yeah.
Do you always know you wanted to do law school, or how did that come about?
Not really. So initially when I got drafted, I mean I was 16, and I basically didn't really go to high school. I ended up taking my GED because well yeah I moved to Vancouver and there was really no high school I could go to that fit my schedule. So I kind of not I yeah I put school on the back end and just didn't really think about it until I got injured a year later. And I couldn't come back from the injury. It took me like 2 years. I kept re-breaking my foot. Doctors couldn't figure it out. And I kind of started thinking like, I mean, I might not be able to play again. And some of the doctors thought, it was basically over. I wouldn't be able to come back. So that's when I started rethinking, all right, well, maybe I do kind of need a backup plan. And I was 18 at the time, and I took my GD and then applied for some schools and got into Northeastern, and did most of my schooling, or actually everything, all of my school online. I did my undergrad and my master's at Northeastern online. So I kind of went that route. But that injury kind of changed my whole perspective of things. Thankfully, it happened very early.
Yeah.
Was it tough to do? I'm sorry, Marcos. Was it tough to do online school and play at the same time?
It was tough. It was tough, but I had kind of already developed the discipline in a way of like kind of balancing both things at the same time. And I mean, as a professional athlete, you train 2 hours a day, 3 hours max, and then you go home and you have from 1 o'clock till you go to bed every single day. So in reality, it's up to you what you do with that time. And I kind of used it for school. Other than when we were traveling, it wasn't too difficult to finish my homework and do what I had to do during that time. So yeah, it wasn't too rough.
Yeah, I can imagine one of the biggest struggles you must have had in that first year of law school was the mental aspect of it, because your injury coincided with the first year, which is known in law school as one of the most tough ones. How did you go about just staying strong and going hard with it?
Honestly, I had no idea what I was doing my first year of law school. I went into law school. I mean, there's no lawyers in my family, and I didn't really understand what law school meant. Undergrad and my undergrad and my master's to me wasn't easy, but it came relatively. I mean, it wasn't very difficult. Whereas law school is a completely different ballgame that I didn't really realize was that difficult. I mean, the fact that you compete against all your classmates, I didn't realize that I was competing for an A with, the other 200 people in my class. So it was, I didn't really understand the magnitude of what law school really meant, especially my first year. And the injury kind of, it took me out for like a month. I didn't recover well from the surgery, and it was a rough year, but I didn't do too terrible where I could recover my second year. So it worked out in the end. I ended up, getting a good job either way. So it didn't hurt me too much.
Even though you didn't know what you were getting yourself into, did you enjoy the first year?
No. No. I don't think law school is particularly fun at all. It's like, it's kind of grueling. Everyone, especially for my year, I felt like it was online. So I didn't really develop that many relationships with other people. I mean, a few, but not really that many. So the competition felt even a little stronger than maybe other years where, you had classmates where you were friends with. Here, it was just like everyone was on their own, or at least from my perspective, that's how it felt. So it was definitely different. But looking back at it, it was interesting what I was learning. I wouldn't say I use all of everything that I learned that first year or that second year in work now, but it definitely, sets up, I guess, a foundation for what you need to know.
People always talk about the cold calling as a main thing in law school. Was that big at Boston College?
Yeah, it's kind of scary. I actually my first year, I think that teacher didn't like me very much. I was coming back from practice and I got cold called in the car, and I was zooming in from my car, and I answered driving, and she was very upset. She wasn't happy about it, but I couldn't do anything about it. I was like balancing, going into training and then going back and being in class, and it was definitely those 6 months where I was doing both. It was really difficult, but it worked out.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what's cold calling?
It's just that the teacher asks you a question about, whatever law, and you have to answer, and you don't know who's getting called or what the question will be. So you they send you readings to do, for every class. And if you're not prepared, then, you're definitely not answering the question.
Right.
So it's kind of scary because, everyone's kind of looking at you to make sure you're answering correctly. And if you don't, it can be talked about after.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully they didn't ask you about, the law about, using a cell phone while you're driving and
Yeah. Yeah. I was trying my best.
So, I mean, to me, like the obvious question is like, how do you feel like being an athlete and the discipline that you had from being an athlete, how did that help you as you were going through law school?
I truly, and from my experience, the discipline that you develop throughout your entire childhood playing sports, and becoming a professional athlete is, it's unteachable in a way, and it's invaluable because I would say most of my teammates that leave the sport and go into something else, I feel like the discipline that we develop kind of helps them become successful in anything else that they do. And yeah, it definitely helped me throughout my entire, not only law school, but throughout my school years. I basically did it for 9 years. So I definitely needed to develop a discipline and a routine every day to be able to do it all.
Right.
Yeah.
So feeding off that question, because you said you got drafted at 16 years old, right?
Yeah.
So I'm guessing you were already a very disciplined person from before that. Was it because you was taught at home, or was it because soccer taught you that, and then you ended up applying it in other fields?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I always knew I wanted to be a professional athlete, and I tried to stay away or do as much as I could to make that dream happen. And that meant obviously being very disciplined about certain things. Like till this day, I never drink, or I never did drink. I've never been drunk in my life. I didn't really do any, I didn't really party much. I go out once in a while, but I kept it, as healthy as I could. I try to eat as healthy as I could. I obviously still got injured a lot throughout my career, but there was things that were not under my control. But I guess I always tried to control what I could, and tried to be as healthy as I possibly could so that I could perform at a high level for as long as I possibly could. Which is, I would say 50% of the guys in the locker room will be very disciplined, and the other 50 likely won't. And the ones that last the most are the ones that the ones that are most likely to last the most, because there are exceptions, are the ones that are obviously very disciplined, and they end up playing till they're 37, 38. Didn't happen to me, but it happens to a lot of them for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I bet you've been in locker rooms though where it's been harder to be the guy that's disciplined than in others, because you might feel like you don't have as much support. Especially, I feel like those young years might have been the hardest. I would like to know a little bit about that. How do you get through those situations where you're like, damn, like I'm the only one not drinking on this night out, or I'm the only one that's not going out and actually sleeping where the rest of the team is out? How do you manage
You
that?
know, I I've always thought of that, and I never really. I was so young that I didn't really think about these things at the time, and I didn't. I mean, I was too young to really, or I thought I was too young to be an example or to be a leader in a group, and I never really tried until the end. In reality, until my last 2-3 years. Whereas, when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, I could have possibly stepped up, but I was kind of thinking about my own performance and my own ability to, succeed on the field. And after so many injuries, I was kind of, my main goal was to become a regular starter in MLS or whatever it was. And when it didn't happen, I would get frustrated with myself and kind of, all I really was thinking about was trying me in a way at such a young age. And looking back at it, I learned more my last 4 years in a locker room than I did, when I was 16, 17, 18. I didn't really realize what was happening to me. I look back at it and I didn't really know where I was at or the opportunity that I had. Having been drafted so young and been drafted with such high expectations, I kind of pressured myself to live up to those expectations a little, and it was definitely very difficult to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I do want to know a little bit more about that draft process because you're the first person that I've ever heard that got drafted at 16 years old. You're going to college too. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So I was playing for the U20 national team. I was playing an age group above with, at the time it was Thomas Rungan, the coach, and his son, Chris Magludis, was an agent, or his stepson was an agent, or was trying to become an agent. And I remember I went to a camp and I did really well in San Jose. And I was still playing for Chivas in Mexico. I was playing for their academy. And Chris Magludis, who was my agent for my entire career, he came up to me and said, I think there's an opportunity for you to declare for the draft and sign for MLS. And I obviously was all for it. I thought it was a great idea. I had just decided to leave Mexico because we got in this huge bus accident where our doctor died, and it was very tragic, and that made me want to leave Mexico. That I wasn't having a good time in Mexico, and I was only 15 at the time, and I wanted to get out. I was like, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go back with my family, and my plan was to go back to high school and play for my local team and just go to college. I had verbally committed to a university, and I just said, I'm just going to go play college. I'm done. And in this camp, I did so well. I scored a couple goals, and he presented me this opportunity to go play in MLS, and I said yes. A month later, I signed in MLS. I was at another camp at the Milk Cup in Ireland, Northern Ireland, and they gave me the contract, and I signed it. It was good deal. I signed Generation Adidas, and it was awesome. I couldn't believe it. It all happened in literally a month. Wow. And the draft wasn't until January. It was January 13th. So for the next 3 months, I finished this camp, and I went to Northern Ireland and played the Milk Cup, and then I trained with the first three draft picks. I trained with Vancouver, Portland, and DC. And then Vancouver had the first pick. They ended up picking me up. I got along really well with the head coach there, and they liked me enough to get me, so young. Wow. It was very cool, and I'm very appreciative of the fact that I was drafted first overall. But it also comes with a lot of pressure that, looking back at it, was difficult to deal with, especially coming into an expansion team that in reality was brand new and hadn't really fully developed and had, we had to basically, the idea was to win, not develop kids or players that were 16. You know what I mean? So it was, yeah, it was. I think it was difficult for me to try and live up to an expectation that I had set up for myself at such, a young age, I guess. And yeah, I mean, maybe in a different circumstance, it would have played out very differently.
Yeah, no, yeah, I bet. And I was very curious actually about why you switched from the Mexico national teams to the U.S. national teams. But I guess it was because of the story that you mentioned, which honestly, that's very scary to hear. But I'm also curious, so about the expectations, because I think you also trained with some Premier League teams, right? Was that ever like an option, or was it ever like told by your agents like, hey, you have a couple good years here, like we'll take you to the Prem or something like that? Because I feel like that's how it usually goes with you have very young players like you were, and very high expectations.
Yeah, so my right when I signed in MLS in that Milk Cup, I did really well. In that Milk Cup, all the big clubs in Europe, they go watch. I played all the big national teams, and it's a big youth tournament. And Everton saw me play there and decided to invite me to train with them. Um, I did really, really well at Everton, and I trained with the U20s, or I don't remember exactly who, U23s, and I did really, really well. And they had decided they wanted to buy me, but they would only pay. I mean, at the time, I think it was $300,000 or $400,000, and because MLS, thought that I was going to be a star, they were putting the price at like 2 million, and I had already signed in MLS. I mean, I this is very far back, but I remember it was something like that. Like the price range was too large for Everton, and they weren't going to spend on an unproven 16-year-old, 15-year-old. So then I ended up just going to the draft instead of going to Everton and trying there. I got injured at Everton 2 weeks after I started playing, and I tore my hamstring. And I was about to start training with the first team right before I got injured, and then I got injured, and I just went home, and then they tried to negotiate something, and it just didn't work out. And then my first year playing in MLS when I was in Vancouver, I was allowed to go train for Fulham for my month and a half that I was, just because the season is so different.
Yeah.
They allowed me to go train a month and a half in Fulham, and at Fulham I didn't do as well. I mean, I was so young that I didn't really understand the opportunity that I had to, show myself or whatever. And I kind of took it. I remember I kind of took it as a vacation in a way. I mean, not that I took it as a vacation, but I didn't really take it as serious as I should have. And I mean, I had just gotten off my first season in MLS, and in the first season I played enough games, and I remember I thought that it was kind of disappointing that they would put me to train with the reserves at Fulham. So I was like, I don't want, like, I was just like, oh, I'm training in MLS. Like, why am I training with the reserves like this?
Yeah.
I mean, I was just a kid and kind of a little brat, to be honest.
Omar, sorry to interrupt, but I'm always curious whenever people do trials with teams like that. Are there any names on the Everton team or the Fulham team that we might recognize today that you saw play and were like, wow, this guy's just a different level?
Yeah, I mean, so with both teams, I did end up training with the first team, not every day, but I did train with the first team. So I remember at Everton, I trained once or twice with Arteta, Tim Howard, and a couple of other of their big stars. At Fulham, I got to know a little bit more of them, and I trained with the first team a lot more. I remember, the guy, he didn't play much at all, but the guy that was really nice to me and would give me rides all the time, Orlando Sa. And then obviously Clint Dempsey was incredibly nice to me. I got to stay at his house a couple of times with his family. He took me around London. It was pretty awesome. We had the same agent, so Clint was really nice to me, and at training would always help me. And he's an incredible person. Him and his wife are incredible, and they treated me really well the month and a half that I was around. So I mean, I got to hang out with some really cool people. Like I said, at the time I didn't realize it. Like I was just, it was just another day. But looking back at it, I'm like, oh, that was really, really cool.
in all these stories that you've mentioned, I realized that you've been alone in them, and alone as in like you were such a young guy abroad without your parents. When you were in Mexico, you said that you missed them a lot. What role did they play in your life? Because if you had an agent, and I don't know what the legal matters of that is, but yeah, what role do they play in your career at such a young age?
I mean, without them, I would have never. First of all, I would have never become a professional athlete. Just because, I mean, the United States, it's kind of difficult without your parents. Because, or back then, it was very difficult because you always had to go to different tournaments, and to be in a competitive environment. Well, I had to get out of El Paso just because El Paso wasn't as competitive as all the big tournaments were in other places. So, thankfully, my dad was very invested in me doing well in soccer, and I would basically go on to a tournament almost every other week, all across the country. And when I became professional, it was a little difficult because I was, I was 16, living in my own apartment, and although it sounds really cool, it was definitely it took some time to get used to. I kind of had to learn how to. I tried to learn how to cook. It didn't really work out, so I ended up just ordering meal preps all the time. It was definitely different. I definitely struggled a little bit the first year, and then you kind of get used to it, and that was it. But
it's not like you had your Uber Eats or DoorDash back then, or you could just facilitate all that.
that actually slowly started coming in 2, 3, 4 years after I started playing. But yeah, no, absolutely not. I would just go to, there's a restaurant up the street that I was probably their best customer. I would eat there almost, every day. And I was trying to figure out, the club would give us some food once in a while. Back then MLS was so different. Just, now I'm in Columbus now, and I visited their training facilities, and it's, night and day to what it used to be. Now, the academy gets food. The first team, there's a, in-house chef all day, all the time. You can basically stay there and, hang out all day. There's beds, there's everything now. There's a gym there. Now MLS kind of, has the infrastructure of the Premier League in a way. It's pretty incredible. Right. Yeah.
I bet that was one of the most shocking things about going to Everton and Fulham, right? Comparing the facilities that they had there probably with the ones that you were used to here in the US.
Yeah. Everton and Fulham's training facilities were pretty incredible. I would say Everton's training facility was top notch. It was very, very nice. Fulham's was older. It was nice, but it was older. Everton's was unreal. Now every single MLS team has, a facility, or almost every single MLS team has a facility just as good or probably better than Everton at that time. But back then, that didn't exist at all. I don't think there was a single club in MLS that had the infrastructure like that. The best one probably was LA Galaxy, and now you look at it and you're like, this sucks compared to all the other clubs. So
it's crazy how much it's growing.
It's 90. When I was in the league, the minimum was $42,000. Now it's $100,000, and the majority make way more than that. So it's a completely different league for sure.
I'm gonna make a terrible joke here, but you said that LA Galaxy is one of the first teams, and I'm pretty sure it's because they had Latin America FC, just all our Latin boys playing for them early on.
Yeah.
They've been there for a while.
A lot of Latinos. A lot of the players that were on the national team, they were coming out of LA. There was a bunch of Latinos from LA and from San Diego, and back then, the national teams were filled with Mexican Americans. Nowadays, you fill them with players playing in Europe and all over the place in Europe. Back then, the national teams would look to Mexico a lot. What Americans play in Mexico, where can we get? Now there's so many players everywhere that, it's the competition is much higher. There's a lot.
Was that sort of your experience? Did you ever consider Mexico as a national team, or you were pretty set on the U.S. for a while?
I played for them. Multiple times. I think I went to at least 7, 8 camps for the U20 national team, Mexican national team. Their facilities were incredible. The atmosphere and the way you were treated was much different than the U.S. national team. For example, back then, I don't know if it's the same now, but back then I remember to go to camp, you had to pay for your own flight, and then they would reimburse you. Whereas in the United States, you had an agent that would do everything, and all the clothes you got new clothes every camp, and you got to keep it. I mean, it was just like there was a bigger investment in the players in the U.S. than Mexico, because in Mexico, I mean, it was an honor to go play for the Mexican national team, and the U.S. national team was just growing and I guess getting its name a little bit, and trying to steal more Mexican Americans from the Mexican national team. So it made sense. You got treated much better in the U.S. national team than you did in the Mexican national team. Although, I would say the person that I got along with the most in my life as a coach was probably the director of the Mexican national team. I mean, I'm still friends with him now, and he was incredible. But other than that, I felt like the treatment otherwise was much better for the U.S. national team. Yeah.
What was the reaction when you decided to switch?
It was not good. I remember there was a lot of drama because I left Chivas. I told them that I was leaving to go to high school, and I just was tired after the accident that we had. I was just like, I'm done. I don't want to be here anymore. Where I lived and everything. I mean, the players, I think they still live there now. They live in these. They were horse stalls that were turned into, basically bunk beds. And you stayed there, and it just wasn't very nice. And I was just like, all right, I'm leaving. So they believed that I was going to high school, and then 2 months later they find out I signed for MLS. So they ended up actually registering me illegally, and claiming that I still had a contract with them. So I wasn't able to play for 6 months while that got figured out. We had to get a lawyer to kind of apply for a extension, or I guess to look at the case and overturn it. So it went to Switzerland, and then the court in Switzerland decided that it was false, whatever the Mexican national team was claiming. Wow. But yeah, for 6 months, it was like 3 to 5 months. I couldn't do anything. I was just training and waiting for them to figure out what had happened. So it was definitely interesting. I mean, back then in Mexico, it was very common. I don't know if it's that common anymore for that to happen, but yeah, it was definitely. I mean, I played in Mexico 6 years, and out of those 6 years, every time I tried to get out, it was always an issue. So, like in Monterrey, when I played for Tigres, in the end, they just decided they didn't want to pay me anymore. So I kind of had to stay there for 4 months without getting paid, training, showing up, and then I had to sue them so they could pay me my money. So it's just different world.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like things are starting to change a lot in this terms, but how did you experience the difference in atmosphere in Mexican fans versus U.S. fans in stadiums?
I mean, it is a huge difference. For Mexico, it's life or death. I mean, and the fan base is on top of you all day. You go out and everyone recognizes you. You have to be careful what you do, what you say, where you are. Everything is much different. Whereas in the U.S. back then, and I still think pretty much now, life is pretty great. I mean, you get paid a lot of money to do what you love, and don't really have the pressure that you do when you play in Europe, or you play in Mexico, or you play in other leagues. Just because it's a newer league, so the fan base is great, but it's a growing league, so it's not as life or death as playing in a Tigres Monterrey game, which is big clásico or a big rivalry or something like that. Best place to play fan wise in MLS was definitely Portland, because Portland's fans were incredible, and their fan base was unreal. They were just it was, to me, that was the best stadium to go play at. It was pretty awesome. Yeah.
That's amazing. So I know Scott would appreciate if we did a little bit of the interview in Spanish. Omar,
okay,
if we did that.
Yeah.
So if you want, I can go ahead. I have a few more questions for you.
Okay.
But if you want, I can make them in Spanish. So the first one,
Yes.
¿cuál es la mejor experiencia que has tenido en tu carrera y cuál es la peor. Supongo que de las peores pues será las lesiones y la lesión con el pie y todo eso, pero aparte de las lesiones, en cuanto a personas, en cuanto a experiencias dentro del campo, fuera del campo, ¿cuál es la mejor y la peor que has tenido?
Sí, yo creo que, bueno, mi mejor experiencia yo creo que fue al principio cuando me escogieron, nomás porque pues, me escogieron primero y fue, digo, en Estados Unidos es un honor ser escogido primero y viene con muchas cosas buenas y obviamente con mucha presión, pero no sé, ese momento para mí fue inexplicable y muy bonito para mí, para mi familia, para todos, digo, no nada más me estoy haciendo, en ese momento no nada más te estás haciendo profesional, pero te están escogiendo como, no sé, una gran estrella o una futura gran estrella, algo así. Entonces, eso fue un momento definitivamente que o sea, de alguna manera fue muy bonita. La peor, yo creo que, este, yo creo que obviamente, pues el choque que tuvimos en Chivas, eso estuvo muy fuerte, donde, pues sí, éramos 25 o 26 en el camión y nomás fuimos poquitos los que en realidad salimos ilesos. Este, que, pues digo, hay cosas del fútbol donde obviamente batallas un poquito, todo se ve muy bonito, pero incluye mucha, no nada más es jugar y hacer las cosas bien. Al final de cuentas, tienes entrenadores que tienen una opinión, directivos que tienen su opinión, agentes, la gente. Lo más difícil para mí, yo creo que fue tener que aprender a lidiar eh, pues sí, en realidad aprender a poder llevarme bien con gente que a lo mejor tenía una opinión diferente o sí. Por ejemplo, a mí me tocó muchas veces que llegaba un técnico nuevo, que se despidía un técnico y llegaba uno nuevo. El técnico nuevo pues no eras jugador de él. Entonces, lo más difícil era encontrar la manera de que te dé la confianza de volver a jugar y de que te lleves bien con él. Al principio batallé mucho en llevarme bien con los técnicos que no me escogieron y para mí mentalmente fue muy complicado, además de que seguía lesionado, fue muy complicado poder entender por qué no jugaba de vez en cuando, con técnicos que pues, yo no conocía y ellos no me conocían a mí. Entonces, cuando eres chiquito y eres bueno, juegas siempre. Lo difícil es entender que cuando ya eres profesional, pues ya es un trabajo y pues sí, no nada más es jugar bien, te tienes que llevar con el técnico, él va a tener su opinión, va a tener a sus jugadores, y si no eres jugadores de él, pues no vas a jugar. Y lo más difícil fue aprender a no jugar y estar bien que no esté jugando.
Sí, sí, desde luego. Yo creo que cualquier persona que juega fútbol suficiente tiempo ha pasado por una situación parecida en la que a lo mejor pues el entrenador simplemente tiene un gusto mejor por otro futbolista y no puede uno hacer nada. Y sé que esto lo has mencionado al principio de la entrevista, que uno pues al final tiene que enfocarse en controlar lo que puede controlar, pero me gustaría saber qué consejo le darías a una persona que se encuentre en esa situación, sobre todo por primera vez, en la que a lo mejor pues llega a una universidad nueva o está jugando en high school o en un equipo profesional nuevo y por primera vez se encuentra en esa situación en la que el entrenador simplemente prefiere a otro y por muy bien que lo haga en el campo, por mucho que dé el 100%, pues a lo mejor no encuentra los minutos que espera, ¿no? ¿Qué le dirías a alguien que esté en esa situación?
Sí, yo creo que lo más importante es ser paciente. Yo nunca fui paciente y en muchas ocasiones me causó muchos problemas porque hablaba un poquito de más y me metía en problemas con los técnicos y metía presión cuando en realidad pues, mi trabajo era quedarme callado e intentar hacerlo mejor y controlar lo que yo pudiera. Eh, yo creo que lo más importante es aprender que no puedes controlar todo y tienes que estar vigente para saber cuándo hablar y cuándo quedarte callado. Y para mí, los primeros años hasta en los últimos, fue difícil quedarme callado cuando yo veía algo que para mí era injusto.
Pero me recuerda un poco a mí. Mira, perdón por interrumpir, pero tengo que irme. Tengo un compromiso, de verdad que no es un compromiso tan grande, pero es una chamusca de fútbol que me tocó
No te
ahorita.
preocupes,
Y como ya me retiré, no tengo muchas oportunidades para jugar, pero
no
gracias
te
por tomar
preocupes.
este tiempo, Omar. Mira, yo
Gracias
voy
a
a tener
ti.
unas preguntas para ti sobre Law School y todo el proceso, entonces, si no te importa, te voy a mandar un request
Claro,
por LinkedIn.
claro que sí. Cualquier cosa aquí estoy para ayudar. Fue un
Sí,
gusto
muchas gracias.
conocerlos. It was a pleasure to meet all of you, and thank you for having me. I
Oh,
appreciate it.
thank you for taking the time to do this. I have
Oh
to
yeah,
head out,
yeah.
but thank you so
Okay.
much. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's good to talk to you guys.
Marcos. Hey,
Thank you.
Omar, one more question for you.
Yeah,
Did you play with Jay Demerit there in
yeah,
Vancouver?
I did. Yeah, I really liked him. He's awesome. We still once in a while message each other for sure.
Yeah, I had him on the podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's
yeah. That's actually how I came across you. Was he commented on
Yeah,
on LinkedIn? It showed up that he
yeah,
commented on something that you did when you graduated from law school, and
yeah. That's awesome.
I was like, well, that'd be cool to have him on. And then I had a connection to Alfredo and Marcos, and it kind of there's so many Spanish speakers who play
Yeah,
soccer, and obviously obviously a lot of the families don't speak English, so I thought it would be cool to
yeah,
kind of make that happen. But
yeah.
yeah,
Thank you for having me, Scott. I appreciate it. This was
yeah,
a lot of fun.
yeah. I really appreciate it. It was
No problem.
to have you on. So
No problem. If I can help in any way, let me know. If you
okay.
need other players, whatever.
Are you based out of Texas, or where are you out of now?
I just moved to Columbus, Ohio, so I'm
Okay.
here for the foreseeable future, I guess.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I was born there.
Oh, no
So
way.
yeah, yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Matter of fact, the academy director there for the crew, Kelvin Jones. Have you met
Yeah,
him?
I met him. He's awesome. Yeah, he's really cool.
Yeah. So he was my son's coach when he was a kid.
Oh, no way.
He lived in. He's from Virginia.
Yeah,
and,
of course. Yeah. He's
yeah. So,
very close friends with my agent. That's how so when I first moved here, my agent got me in contact with them, and I went over to the club and just got to see it. It was pretty cool. And yeah, Calvin Jones is awesome.
yeah.